The July meeting of Leeds City Council Executive Board. I'll remind everybody at the start of the meeting that this is a webcast, and I'm going to start by going through the formalities at the top of the agenda. So, are there any appeals against refusal of inspection of documents, please?
Thanks, Chair. To confirm, no appeals have been received for today's meeting.
Thank you. And can you update us on exempt information, please?
Certainly, Chair, yeah. Should the board be agreeable, then Appendix 2 to Item 16, which is Heart of Holbeck, Levelling Up Round 3 funding, is designated as being exempt from publication under Access to Information Procedure Rule 10.43 and will be considered in private at the conclusion of the public part of the meeting.
Thank you. On to item 3, and could you update us on late items, please?
Thanks, Chair, yeah. There are no formal late items of business today. However, with your agreement, an updated Appendix 2 to Item 14, which is the EDCI screening form for the Community Asset Transfer Policy Report, has been circulated to board members and published for consideration as part of Agenda Item 14. This update is in response to Scrutiny Board's recent consideration of the proposed updated CAT policy.
Thank you. And then item 4, I turn to the board and see if there's any declarations of interest. Councillor Arif, please.
Yes, Chair, I've got an interest under the agenda item 17. When the item's heard, I will leave the room. Thank you.
Thank you. Turn to item 5 in the minutes of the meeting we held on the 19th of June. Is everybody happy with those minutes? I take it that we are. Before we move on to the papers on the agenda, this is the first meeting we've had since the disorder at in Hare Hills last week. And I don't think you can pass without comments. I'm going to invite Councillor Arif to say some words as a ward member for Gipton and Hare Hills, and I'll bring Councillor Lamb in. Councillor Arif, please.
Thank you, Chair. I guess it's going to be a week tomorrow. It's to say the least, it was an incredibly difficult and distressing night for myself as a ward councillor and everybody in the area, and of course the city as well. I guess what we saw was sort of the worst of Hare Hills, but on the flip side, we also saw the very best of Hare Hills on that night, with local residents trying to calm the situation, lots of local residents trying to put out the fires as well. You know, really grateful, despite the disorder, there were no injuries. There was no damage to business or properties. And thankfully, since then, there hasn't been any further disorder. And sort of, I've been there, as you can imagine, pretty much all the time. Had lots of different meetings with different people in the community trying to calm the situation down. And it does seem to have sort of got quieter and quieter. I just want to thank everybody for their support, for even a text message, their kindness. It has been, as I say, very difficult. From my perspective as the elected member, we don't want any further attention. We want to rebuild as a community, and that's something we're working towards. You know, there'll be things to reflect on, which we will do. But importantly, as a community, we want to move forward, take lessons and rebuild. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb, please.
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, thank you for bringing this. I think it's right that at the first opportunity that we talk about the issue. I'd like to start by paying tribute to Councillor Arif and her colleagues and community leaders for the work that they've done in the community to try and calm things down, and I suspect there'll be a lot more to do, but thank you for what you did. I think one thing that's been missed in a lot of the coverage, and I think it's really important that we speak up for our social care staff who were involved doing their job to keep children safe from harm, and we mustn't forget the important role they do, and remember how high the bar is set by a judge to take the horrible decision to take any child into care. But I think with all of the conversations and all of the media coverage, one thing that's been forgotten is that valuable work that our social care staff do. So, and I'm sure everyone around the table will want to join me in thanking them and thinking about them and the terrible situation. Not only on that occasion they have to deal with it, but they have to deal with it every day, day in, day out, to keep children safe from harm. And I applaud them and thank them for that. There are going to be a lot of questions about this. I think it's too soon to ask a lot of them. There needs to be a proper review process. My probably one and only question today is around that, and have we thought about how and when and by who the learning lessons exercises are going to take with something like this. It's important that that is not to cast blame on people. It's about understanding what happened, why it happened, why it escalated the way it did, and are there things that we could have done differently without blaming people, and should do differently if the same thing happens again. It needs to be done properly and calmly, but it'd just be useful to have an understanding of if there's a plan to as yet to do that, and when we can expect that to happen.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. And, you know, I would echo your comments around our staff at the council. You're right about our social work staff and also staff in environmental services and communities that have been working through on the weekend to bring up really is the best of public service. We have committed to a review. I agree with you. Less than a week on is too early to get into the details of that, but we have committed to a review. We've publicly committed to that review, and that work will be ongoing. Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, so just one more point that was remiss. Given a lot of the reporting, the way things have come out, there are lessons to learn, but I think it's important that we put on record at this point, and so I'm asking for an assurance that we will never allow violence and intimidation be a factor in our decision making about child protection cases. We will do what's right to keep children safe, and it doesn't matter how much threat of violence and intimidation there is. That will never be a factor in our decision making.
Thank you. I think everybody around the table would agree with that. You know, the temptation, you know, we've had it in the past. But we're very clear at the moment that the position we're in at the moment is that violence and imitation, interference and things like that do not play a part of a part in those. Like, as we've said, we're going to look at a review into what we do, but we're very clear about that and about how the children are at the heart of our work in terms of children's social care. Okay, with that, I'm going to move on to the items on the agenda and move on to item 6. Councillor Arif, it's your papers first, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The first agenda item I've got is item 6. The Community Health and Wellbeing Service is a new model for home care, which was driven by a need to improve existing services and capacity. It has been co-designed with social workers, citizens and providers, supported by data analysis, and will be co-commissioned with Leeds Community Healthcare to create capacity for their registered workforce. There are a number of benefits to this new model of home care. It's based on small neighbourhood teams delivering consistent and personalised support. Care workers will be paid their full shift with autonomy to support community and social connections. The model aligns occupational therapists with the care providers to enable a focus on reablement, supporting people to retain or regain their independence. And through the integrated model with Leeds Community Health, it is anticipated that people will be supported to live and stay well. Avoidable hospital admissions will be prevented as a small and consistent care teams know what a good day looks like and flag concerns very quickly. Staff will be trained in falls prevention and spotting signs of infections, and localised teams will build relationships with local GPs and community health services. The pilot aims to be cost neutral or save money by adjusting packages and filling rota gaps with healthcare tasks. Performance and delivery data will be closely tracked with key risks identified and mitigated. The new model requires as many people as possible to transfer to the new service. A rapid review process will identify people for whom a move is not suitable. Both providers have recent experience of mobilising contracts and supporting a smooth transition of service users and staff. Just to also add, extensive consultation has happened with local ward members. This was taken to scrutiny a couple of weeks ago. It was really well received by all members on scrutiny as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think overall it's a good paper, very welcome, a good approach to take. As you say, it's been through scrutiny properly. One of two questions is what's the plan for scrutiny to monitor its implementation going forwards? It is a big change, so it's just useful to know how scrutiny are going to monitor it, when it will come back here. And the second question is just, I understand there's a funding gap of around £300,000. I'm not quite clear from the papers how that is going to be filled and who's covering that.
Yes, please, Councillor Arif, and then I'll bring Caroline, and welcome back, Kath. I'll bring Caroline and Kath in, but Councillor Arif, please.
So in relation to your first question, Councillor Lamb, scrutiny were really interested in this item because other members wanted this in their area. So they are really keen for this to be sort of monitored and come back. And I believe so is the chair. So it'll be in their forward plan to sort of come back and sort of see the impact. I believe possibly early next year, from what I recall in the meeting. So that it's certainly on their radar to sort of be monitored and looked at. But I'm sure Caroline will add a little bit more. Thank you.
Caroline, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lewis and Councillor Lamb. Yes, Scrutiny Board have asked that we come back within about 6 months of the pilot commencing. It's going to commence in September, so we're looking at March, April time to go back. One of the other things to add is that there is going to be external evaluation of the outcomes that are being delivered as a result of this pilot, so we'll be able to weave that into the discussion that we have at Scrutiny Board when it goes back again as well.
So I'll respond to that, Councillor Lamb. Hello. We've got 3 key mechanisms for ensuring this balances. One is we are going to pay on planned care rotas and ensure that the amount of care delivered correlates to what is planned. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes there is a gap and sometimes there is too broad a gap, in which case we use contract mechanisms to claw money back. The second and probably most key way is we've invested in a trusted assessor function. Care workers, care agencies see these individuals day in, day out. They know what their good day is, they know what their bad day is, and we are giving them the flexibility to adjust packages according to need in a much more timely way. At the moment, if we think somebody needs a change in care, it gets referred to a social worker, and our social workers are really, really busy at the moment. So the ability of our social work service to keep dynamically reviewing care just isn't possible really at the moment. So we also believe, because the care agencies and care workers sees that person more regularly, they're probably best placed to be able to make those adjustments. They have to be done with the agreement of the individual. They trial it for up to 4 weeks, and then if it looks like that adjustment up or down is right, it is then referred to a social worker to review and sign off. So there are some safeguards we've built within that. The evidence from other places that have done this, that has got the trusted assessor function, is that the average cost, the average size of package reduces, because you're just making better use of the assets you've got. You are recycling those hours more dynamically. And then the third element is to allow shorter visits. At the moment, we say the minimum has got to be 30 minutes, but actually consultation with our citizens said they weren't very pleased with that. They only want somebody in their home for as long as it's necessary. And if somebody's turning up to, say, do a medication prompt, it's no more than 15 minutes. They only want to be charged for 15 minutes. They don't want to be held to, well, it's got to be 30 minutes. So we're trying to respond more flexibly to citizens' wishes as well. And again, that makes better use of care hours. So that's how we believe it will balance, but we're holding a contingency pot which came via an NHS transformation fund just to cover off the contingency, because I'm very aware that council budgets are very, very tight at the moment. So the worst possible scenario, if it didn't balance, we've got the money there to cover it off, so there is no overspend.
Thank you. I take it there's no further comments on this item, so I'll turn to the recommendations and see everybody's happy with those recommendations. Thank you, and we'll move on to item 7, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this report follows the decision taken at December's exec board to consult on the proposals made as part of the council's budget setting process for 2024 and 2025. A detailed process of consultation has taken place involving speaking to residents, families, staff at Knoll Manor and Dolphin Manor, and local elected members who've provided feedback through other channels. The context of these recommendations is that the use of residential care homes has declined over the past few years, with people choosing to remain at home for longer or accessing alternative services, including extra care, that is now available following significant investment by the council. There are other care homes with vacancies available locally, and therefore we feel that there are suitable alternatives. There are also jobs available for staff affected at Knoll Manor in our other in-house care delivery services, and the proposed changes to Dolphin Manor involve retaining the staff team. There are 8 residents currently at Knoll Manor and 15 permanent residents at Dolphin Manor who will be affected by the decisions. The occupancy levels in both homes have varied over the last 5 years, but have never exceeded 73% and are significantly lower than that now. To put that into context, to be a viable a home needs to operate at an occupancy rate of a minimum of 85%. In addition, there is a potential to use the Knoll Manor site once the decision has been made to repurpose the site for extra care purposes or for sale via the council's capital receipt programme. A decision which is yet to be made and will follow this decision. Now, this is sort of the steer we've had from ward members following a meeting we had with them about 4 weeks ago. The Dolphin Manor proposal sees the council's resources being put to good use as part of the refreshed intermediate care strategy, building on the success of our recovery hubs, which has been underpinned by the Home First programme. If agreed, we would have proposed to use the building and staff at Dolphin Manor to provide a service that would benefit the Leeds system by enabling more people to return home via a short-term stay in a rehabilitation service, and will ultimately benefit the Leeds City Council budget through including long-term spend on residential and home care and investment in the future of the service. There has been extensive consultation, as I've said, with everyone involved, as reflected in the feedback in the appendix to the report. I'd like to add that we are confident that through the use of the dedicated reviewing team, the care guarantee and consistent communications throughout the process, that people will be settled in their own time in new locations. We are also confident that the staff affected will be supported into other roles within the service. The closure of Knoll Manor and the changes to Dolphin Manor will achieve an in-year saving of £100,000 with recurrent savings of £400,000 from 25-26. The cost for Dolphin Manor will be covered through the new contract for intermediate care, which will allow the council to retain staff's employment and contribute to a service which enables swifter discharge from hospital and promotes independence. This will make a contribution to the reduction of costs for adult social care as a whole. This is a difficult decision, and I'm very mindful of the impact that this decision will have. We will support people to move to a home of their choice, and nobody will experience any financial and disadvantage as a result of this transfer. The social work team will work with people and their families and will hold follow-up reviews to ensure they are settled. This, I hope, will assure people affected by the move. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arif. Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've had quite a number of concerns raised with me about these. I'll take your guidance if you'd like me to do everything in one hit and have the answers in one hit, or is it easier to do Knoll Manor, then Dolphin, and then I've got a couple of wider points as well?
Let's do it that way, Alan.
All in one?
No,
it's separate. Okay. So around Knoll Manor, I think you referred, Councillor Arif, to the views of local members. My understanding is that they're looking to try to save the building. They understand the financial challenges and situation, but one of the points is what a good condition the building is in. It's recently had investment in solar panels and heat pumps, I believe. The point's made that none of us feel that social care funding has properly been addressed yet, and it doesn't there's no indications yet that the new government is going to do any more on that than previous ones, but we can live in hope. So I wonder if you can give us a bit more reassurance about what the opportunities are locally to try and give the opportunity for the community and ward members to take this building forward for the community support centre that they're keen to see delivered in their community.
Thank you. Caroline, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lamb. So the condition of the building, yes, there was some investment in solar panels, but we had a capital programme agreed pre-COVID for all three of our long-term care homes. So that was Knoll Manor, Dolphin Manor and Spring Gardens. The work commenced post-COVID on refurbishment of initially Spring Gardens and then latterly Dolphin Manor. But the cost of refurbishment far exceeded the capital fund that we had, and we've run out of money and don't have enough money to cover the cost of refurbishing Knoll Manor. It is actually in quite a poor condition, despite the investment in solar panels previously. The cost of maintaining the building, even at its current state, is quite excessive. We know that local residents or potential residents, not current residents, but potential people are electing not to choose Knoll Manor as their place if they're deemed requiring residential care, because we've got a lot of alternative independent sector residential provision in the area, which is higher grade in terms of the conditions of the buildings. They have ensuite facilities, much more sort of modern building, and therefore we know that just by the very nature of the standard of the building, people are not electing to move in there. If we were to raise the standards of the building, that's going to be a really additional, albeit one-off cost. But even without doing a refurbishment plan, there will be ongoing costs to maintain the building because of its current poor state. So that's one of the main drivers for people not choosing to move into the home, and therefore really reduced occupancy levels. So we haven't got a plan other than a massive capital investment to make the building in a way that actually would be suitable for ongoing community resource.
I think the myself and Councillor Arif, I mean, obviously, clearly the paper in front of us today is about the long-term care service and the residents and the staff there. Myself, Councillor Arif, met some of the Morley councillors, and the now MP for Morley, around making sure the work that's set out in this paper around coming out of the long-term residential care will take some time, and looking for opportunities for wider funding to make sure the site can be used, if possible, in the future for care and health services in Morley. To be clear, that's our aspiration. We've committed to work with the ward council. I think they were from a number of political groups and also the local MP. That's not in today's paper, which is about the future of the long-term care service, but we have made that commitment to work on it moving forward. And when we're ready to make a decision about that, it'll come back here.
Yeah, thank you for that. So moving on to Dolphin Manor, where one of the concerns that have been raised for me is around the level of consultation, which, as I understand it, and happy to be corrected, has essentially only taken place with the residents of the home rather than a full consultation with the wider community. I believe elected members have been engaged with, but it was at their request rather than something that was offered to them. That's what was suggested to me. And again, it feels like something that's being done to the community rather than with it. I'll make my slightly wider points at the same time. So one of the wider concern, I believe we'll only have one council-run care home at the end of this, and we're some would say we've pretty much fully privatised care in the city over the last decade or so, I have a concern that actually it's important that there's still a role for the council to set the standards and the benchmarks, and as part of having a mixed economy of care, particularly around some specialist care and the lack of dementia care provision in particular. I can understand where this is going. I've got some reservations about it. So I wonder if you can address those concerns about Dolphin and the engagement consultation, but the wider points as well, please.
Caroline, please.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'll answer the second question, but then I will pass on to Carla, our head of service for care delivery services, to answer the former question around consultation, because she's been heavily and directly involved in leading that work, if that's okay. So in terms of our presence in the market as a provider of long-term care for older people, that's right, we will only then have one care home, which will be Spring Gardens. In reality, the volume of in-house beds for long-term care is really small. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever in terms of the volumes of people who are choosing our own local authority provision, because it is so limited. And also, even whilst we had the 3 homes, they're not being fully occupied. So what we've had to do is that we've actually had an extensive cost for maintaining the bed capacity, the long-term bed capacity, and we've utilised that under occupancy by way of short-term provision for people coming out of hospital, or for respite provision. So we've not really managed to use it for its initial purpose, which was long-term residence, as has already been stated and as in the report. We currently only have 8 long-term residents. The majority of the beds, particularly in Knoll Manor, but also in Dolphin Manor, have been used to help with any sort of surge that has been needed through winter pressures and hospital discharge capacity. And that was one of the rationales and reasons for also considering using Dolphin Manor for intermediate care, because that's where we know there is a gap in the market. That's where we as a local authority could be a specialist provider, and in partnership with Leeds Community Health, be the only provider of intermediate care, short-term discharge from hospital bed capacity. So we're actually looking to plug that gap in the market and be a specialist provider. We also are very mindful that intermediate care beds currently for hospital discharge are not readily available in the wider market. Independent sector providers don't want to provide short-term provision, particularly for people with dementia and complex needs. And we've already tested delivering dementia care for people discharged from hospital in one of our existing intermediate care recovery hub facilities, and that's working really well. And we are already, even before these proposals were put forward, we were looking at converting 12 of the beds at Dolphin Manor to use specifically for hospital discharge for people with dementia, because that's exactly where we saw the gap and the need for provision. So if anything, we're going with where we know we could probably deliver good value and also a really high quality service for people who otherwise are not getting a service in the market, in the wider market. I'll hand over to, sorry, yes, of course.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the response, and I'm reassured to a degree at the creation of the recovery hubs and the intermediate care. Absolutely support that. I'm a little bit conflicted, which is probably more about the process that we're going to come to, and where you say there are only 8 residents left, which is part of the justification. Can you clarify when we stopped taking people? Because my understanding is one of the reasons there's only 8 is because we long ago, really, this decision was effectively taking and we stopped admitting more residents.
If I could just clarify, the 8 is residents at Knoll Manor. So at Dolphin Manor, I believe there are something like 15 long-term residents. And in terms of the point at which we were stopping admitting new long-term admissions, in Dolphin Manor, that was earlier because of the refurbishment plans and the programme for refurbishment. So we stopped admitting sometime in 2023. Carla will confirm the dates for me, but it is now open and fully refurbished. Knoll Manor, we did stop taking referrals, new admissions, because the refurbishment plan had been put back because of the lack of availability of funding. So the point at which the admissions, long-term admissions were ceased was at the point in December when we came to exec board with the proposal to go out to consult on closure of that particular unit. But if you don't mind, I'll pass to Carla, because if there's anything I've said that is inaccurate in terms of numbers, Carla will correct me and she'll provide more details as well.
Thank you, Caroline. No, there's nothing to correct. With regards to permanent admissions into Dolphin Manor, it was around about September time, and that was on the advice of health and safety because of the refurbishment works. We were still able to support a number of permanent residents in Dolphin Manor, up to around about 21 permanent customers, safely within that health and safety guidance. And we can see that we've only got 15 permanent customers currently, so that gives you a temperature of demand, if you like, for permanent admissions. With regards to your second question regarding consultation, I'd like to give some assurance that consultation was very much considered and done in a very timely way to engage with ward members, with families. We engage with staff, even though no staff were implicated by the proposal for Dolphin Manor. Many of those meetings I chaired myself and supported with ward members, with Caroline and Shona. And we tried within the consultation report in the appendix to detail that in quite granular detail to provide that reassurance.
You want to come back, Councillor Lamb?
Very quick follow-up, sir, but am I right that there wasn't a wider formal consultation? It was quite tight with the resident community, ward members, you say, and staff. There wasn't a sort of community consultation about it.
So we were inclusive of anybody who wanted to join in, but we didn't go out to the wider community to try and target members of the community. So the answer to that is no, but we were inclusive, and any of the consultation exercise, any of the meetings were open. So we had large representation from families and friends and loved ones who are members of the local community. We also received lots of feedback from the ward members, giving feedback from the local community.
Councillor Cooper, please.
Yeah, if I could just add to the level of consultation taking place, of course, as part of the overall budget proposals, there was a citywide consultation undertaken where both Knoll Manor and Dolphin Manor, am I right in the two names? Yeah, were named. And that consultation was taking place citywide across the whole of the residents and public and any interested parties.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to come in on this item, please? I don't see anybody, so I'm going to move to the recommendations on page 48. And I take it everybody's happy with those. Councillor Lamb.
Just like it recorded, I reserve my position on those recommendations.
Thank you. And everybody else is happy with the recommendations. So thank you, Councillor Arif. And we'll move on to item 8, which is under the children's portfolio. Councillor Hayden isn't here today, so all I will say in introducing item 8 is that the paper is very short in referring to the scrutiny meeting that took place. We have reflected on the scrutiny meeting and the comments made by people, and we accept scrutiny's recommendation that point G in the original decision that the Director for Children and Families should take the decisions in respect of the 12 that are looking part of the market sounding exercise, and we will bring that, like I say, given the level of public interest, the level of councillors' interest at scrutiny, we will bring, we'll accept the scrutiny recommendation, which will be bringing that back to executive board at a future meeting. I don't think it was a very long scrutiny meeting, and I'm grateful for everybody that took part in that. But at this meeting, I don't think there's much more that needs saying other than we'll come back to a future meeting.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chair. Yeah, I'm sorry, Councillor Harland isn't. I hope all is. Sorry, Councillor Hayden isn't here. Sorry, I got mixed up because I was remiss of me earlier not to say how good it is to see you here today, Councillor Harland, and to have you here. But yes, I mean, I think the report shows it was absolutely right to call in this decision. It shows that my points at the last board meeting were right, that we didn't have all of the information in front of us to make a proper decision at that point. And I think there should be some reflection on that. And I think Councillor Hayden has recognised and acknowledged that to a degree herself as well. I assume from your opening remarks that the board is going to be supportive of the resolution from scrutiny, that this is a decision that should be taken by elected members going forwards, not by the director directly. That was obviously supported unanimously by all members of the scrutiny board, including the chief whip of the council. So I'll assume we're going to support that. And just to commend the scrutiny board for a thoroughly well done job of investigating this, and it once again shows that the value of effective scrutiny in Leeds and getting good decisions eventually.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I can confirm, like I say, that the decision will be coming back to executive board at a future meeting. Great, thank you. Does anybody else want to comment on this? I don't see anybody else, so we will agree that recommendation, and like I say, just to confirm, this decision will come back in the future. And with that, we'll move on to item 9, which Councillor Pryor is going to introduce.
Thank you, Leader. So happy to take this item on behalf of Councillor Hayden. So this is the outcome of the consultation on a proposal to change the age range of Moor Allerton Hall Primary School from 3 to 11 years to 4 to 11 years and to permanently close the local authority maintained nursery. So this is asking Exec Board to note the outcome of the public consultation and approve the publication of the statutory notice. It's worth noting that while there are currently 24.5 full-time equivalent children attending, this would be planned to drop to 5.5 from September. There will be a further report to the November Executive Board bringing forward the outcome of the proposed statutory notice.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you. The questions are around, is this, it's a bit like Little Owl last time, given we've just had a change of government, which you'll all be delighted about, and there's a apparently fully costed manifesto commitment to create new childcare places, particularly in old school, in redundant school buildings. Isn't it premature that we're making this decision without waiting to see the specifics of that policy? And isn't there a risk that we might end up having to reverse it and revisit it down the line?
First of all, it goes without saying we all welcome the new government, but I'll bring Dan in on the question you raised.
So thank you, Dan Barton, Deputy Director for Learning. I think the answer to the question specifically is probably around sufficiency in the local area. So the decision is being proposed because of a reducing population of children and young people in that area and a sufficiency in the locality of available provision. There is also, I think you'll be aware that the school is considering working alongside a private provider that would come in and offer an alternative avenue whilst taking off some of the financial pressure on the school currently, which is the origin for the proposal in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to comment on this paper? I don't see anybody, so I'm going to turn to the recommendations on page 221. I take it, Councillor Lamb.
Again, I'd just like to record that I reserve my position on this one.
Sorry, take it. Everybody else is happy with the paper. That's great. Thank you. We'll move on to item. Item 10, which is under my portfolio, and the annual corporate risk report, which is a report we bring every year. So to the exec board, we are considering the risks that could cause challenges to the resilience of the council and other organisations we work with in the city. I think it's fair to say for those of us who've studied these reports intently over the years, the number of high risks is getting higher as things change. We continue to obviously report them here through corporate leadership team and do what we can to mitigate them, but that does recognise the environment that local councils are moving in. Some good news during the year because of the work we've done on the flood alleviation scheme. The risk of major flooding is likely to drop, so it's not everything moving in a riskier direction, but we do need to recognise the fact that, like I say, it is a more challenging environment for the council to working at the moment, and the increase in risk in this report reflects that. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, a lot of the financial risks are the big red light flashing on the dashboard. I think we can cover those off in later reports rather than now. And a lot of the other risks we're discussing in some form in the papers. The one I wanted to ask about and focus on a little bit was around the topical IT issues. And I know that we weren't particularly affected or affected at all last week. But I just wonder if someone can talk to us about that, because I'm pretty sure if 10 days ago we'd spoken to the major airports and airlines and air traffic control and GPs, they'd have said they were very confident that their systems were robust. And we're always at the mercy of something. So while it's good that we weren't affected last week, how confident are we that going forwards we are robust and we've got good backup systems in place for communication and the like?
It's a great question. Mariana, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a difficult one because we can never be 100% guaranteed, as you know, lots of organisations found out last week. I think what I would say is we're as confident as we can be, and we do invest a fair bit in cybersecurity. We try and be on the front foot as much as we possibly can. We do a lot of sharing of best practice so that we can be on the front foot. We try and make sure our systems, as we're procuring them, are as resilient as they possibly can be, and counter as many risks. We do get lots of risks happening and lots of cyber attacks happening day in, day out, but our systems are stopping those as they are again in lots of other organisations. But we're definitely not complacent, because it could easily have been us on Friday, and given that we were dealing with the Hare Hill situation, it would have been really challenging. So absolutely not complacent, but as confident as we can be that we've got as good arrangements as possible in place. We did pick this up at scrutiny on Monday as well, because it's understandably very topical and something that we know has very significant effects on our day-to-day operations and the people that we serve.
Thank Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now is probably not the time to give me the detail, but it would be useful to understand what operational backup plans we've got in place for key services, and particularly the world as the threat of cyber attacks has grown, the world has changed, and where if you suddenly had a power outage, you could go next door across the office to speak to your colleague. Frequently, they won't be in the same building, same city. What backups do we have to make sure those communications are in place and operational key services wouldn't be affected, or there's a contingency for it?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, business continuity planning is a very topical, corporate governance and audit did some really good work a few years that really helped us. We identified all our critical services, and all those colleagues do have, as good a plans in place as they can be. We try and make sure we keep business continuity absolutely live in our communications regularly with managers, to make sure that they are tested periodically, so that as changes happen, like, for example, COVID, home working, that they're as live as they possibly can be. And we have got certain backup systems, but it's probably worth an offline briefing to give you a little bit more detail. Because again, we deliver such a vast range of services, and there are so many different types of risks and business continuity challenges that happen, that is quite a situational issue rather than a blanket, just give you one simple answer. It's very dependent on, which service we're talking about and what it's impacted by. But a lot of activity goes on that, and we do try and keep it very live.
Thank you. Are there any more comments on this report, please? No, that's great. I shall turn to the recommendations on page 239. I take it everybody's happy with those. Thank you. We'll move on to Councillor Cooper's papers and item 11, please.
Thank you, Leader. And the first of my reports is the annual corporate performance report. The report covers a summary of the best city ambition, the organisational plan, and how corporate level performance is monitored and reported throughout the year, as well as links to equality, diversity and inclusion. The report goes into a number of citywide highlights, and they're given to tell more of a story around how we have performed over the last year. The report covers a lot of high-level corporate KPIs that are in the report as well. But it's important to notice that this performance reporting stems from, the individual team members and teams through services monitoring their own work and their own performance, right up to this corporate leadership team and the exec board members. As a city, we've also developed new tools like Social Progress Index, which can help us make better use of the data and research. The report also has a section in it about the Office of Local Government, Oflog, which aims to provide authoritative and accessible data and analysis about the performance of local government. So you'll see that for the first time in terms of benchmarking in the introduction of that criteria. I just want to pull out a couple of key performance indicators to share with the Executive Board. So one of them is around the preventable death causes in under age 75, which are falling most quickly in the most deprived parts of the city, which is really good news. And also, I just wanted to point out that the prevalence of children aged between 5 and 11 who are obese have shown a decline, continuing decline in the work that's been undertaken around reducing obesity in children there. There is a lengthy report. I'm sure exec board members have been through it, so I'll leave it there, Leader, for any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Lamb, please.
But given the level of detail in here, this could be a long session. However, you'll be pleased to know my general view is that this is for scrutiny to dig down into properly at the relevant scrutiny boards. There is one area I would like to focus on, which is the performance of the refuse service, which, if you look at the headlines, 99.91% of bins collected on time. As I think Councillor Rafiq knows, residents in my ward would probably disagree with that, and I think residents in his ward as well would disagree with that. I would like to see us put a metric in here, because, as we all know, that's not having the bin collected on its correct day. That's having it collected on its correct day, or the day after that, or the day after that. There's no other walk of life where you'd measure on the day across 3 days. I know we're about to start putting glass in the recycling bins, which I'm delighted at, because that's something we've been calling for a considerable amount of time. But I wonder if you could comment on the impact and preparedness for that. I'm sure you're disappointed not to have the opportunity to announce the food waste going in brown bins at the last council meeting. And again, that's something we've been calling for some time, but that adds a new pressure. And are we going to change the policy around brown bin recovery? Because people will be very reluctant to put food waste in if, on a regular basis, as happens in my ward, the bins are then not collected, and because they're not seen as a priority or statutory service, it can be the next collection time or the one after that. And if people put food waste in, and it's not uncommon, as you know, for 6 weeks later, the same brown bin is there. And with more and more weight in the green bins and the brown bins, there's a concern that we're going to have more failures. So I wonder if you could comment, A, on can we have the proper metric of how many bins actually got missed? So instead of pretending that we're emptying almost 100% of bins on time, we're actually honest with ourselves about the performance, and what the impact and preparedness is of the new policies.
And exciting news is for you, Councillor Lamb, is we'll bring a lot more information forward on preparedness. So rather than dealing with it on this report, we will deal with it at future meetings. So it'll be something for you to look forward to. I'll ask Councillor Rafiq to come in, please.
Thank you, Leader. No, first of all, regard to the message, I think the survey that we did, I acknowledge that a council and some of the answers to the questions which were put to council the other week, they should be going out. A lot of them, obviously, from your party and Councillor Anderson, which everybody will receive a reply to and explain. I think one of the reasons has been for the last couple of months is as we know over the last few years is sourcing driver cover, but we have actually made some arrangements where we don't rely on that, so we've got more people in the pool trained and all that. So going forward, I think you'll see improvements, which there has been, we acknowledge, in the last couple of months. But I think other than the last couple of months, you'll agree that the service has been exemplary with regards to the collections. 99% of the brown bins, actually, even in the last 2 months, have been collected on time. But 1%, which affects a few wards, not all the wards, and it's not acceptable, and we do that even one month. With regard to your point about, we are exploring all options with regards to curbside food collection. So let's park that there. But if there was going forward, your reference to food going to brown bin or co-mingling, if that was the case, then it will change the way we see brown bins collected at the moment, which is actually a discretionary service. If food goes into it, it becomes a compulsory service, so it'll be given a same priority as the green bin or any general waste. So I can assure you of that, because if food is collected, whether it's weekly or fortnightly, then it has to be done. It's not, well, we can't collect the others, then this will be, left to whenever we could. That will not be the case. But that's we are doing work on that, and will be brought forward to scrutiny and elected colleagues in the near future. Thank you.
Councillor Lamb.
Thank you. I really don't mind. I'm happy to let you make your announcement now that you couldn't make in the council meeting. It's entirely up to you. But the key thing I would like, which you didn't address, is can we have the metric in here about how many bins were emptied on their actual collection day? It is not accurate to say 99.91% of bins were emptied on time. They were not. It's fine if you want to keep it in as your measure, but for the real world,
I'm happy to provide you with the actual the percentage or the collection, both in terms of tons and the collection as well. I think that information is available, and it's including some of the questions we've answered, so we can do that. That's not an issue. We'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think that perhaps Councillor Lamb, using one of the KPIs into the performance report to get information around the refuse collection is well done. Well done. But what I wanted to say is that in terms of this report, we need to be able to stick to our key KPIs that we report on a regular basis, and we can benchmark from previously and so on. I'm more than happy that Councillor Rafiq has agreed to give you that further information that you have required, but we need to remember to report our KPIs so that we can continue with working out how well we're doing in the performance from one quarter to another and 1 year to another. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you. I'll take my mild rebuke in the spirit it was given. I guess I accept I took a bit of creative license. Of course, had Councillor Rafiq replied to any of the many emails I've sent him in recent times about the poor service in our area, I wouldn't have needed to.
Councillor Rafiq, please. Although we are dipping into a bit of Wetherby Ward
it would
casework.
be remiss of me. Sorry, it would be remiss of me not to mention that you know the meeting we had the last time you had it, but if you're getting a response within hours, not days, from officers, and I'm copied into it, I think you know that there isn't for every meeting of officers there to which you have been getting. So well, let's leave it there. I'm happy to, if you want to have another meeting with the office with me present, I'm happy to do that, which I've done in the past for you.
Great, a happy ending. Any more questions? Any more questions on the on this paper, please, or shall we turn to the recommendations on page 275? And I take it everybody is happy with those, so we'll move on to item 12 and 13, Councillor Cooper, which I know you want to take together.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And if exec board members will indulge me taking these two items as one introduction, because they both obviously relate to one another. So if I can first of all take the financial health monitoring Q1 report first. And exec board members will know that we report back at every executive board the current situation of our finances within the council, and this is the first quarter reporting since we set the budget about how the finances are looking in this particular year. So it's a unfortunate position that I am reporting to Executive Board today, in that we have currently a forecast to overspend in year by £19.9 million, and that's so far at Q1. In the report, the revenue report, it does go into the levels of mitigation that we're taking as a council to bring that down within year. It explains a number of savings proposals that have been delayed from last year for varying reasons that we do hope will come through within this year and will ultimately bring that overspend down. But of course, we need to report that overspend at this particular time. The main areas for overspend are in adults and health of 7.9 million, in children's and families of 17.9 million, and mainly again, it's the often spoke about at Executive Board external residential placements for our children looked after here in the authority that are causing those pressures. And of course, you'll read from the report all the other mitigating measures that we are taking within year to bring that down. The capital programme report linked to the Q1 reporting is outline our capital spending, of which we are reviewing the capital programme this year, and it is mentioned in the report, which is why I wanted to take them together, because there is a need for us to try and ease the pressure on the revenue account, actually, by reviewing our capital programme as well. The level of borrowing that the organisation have is in line with us being able to facilitate that level of borrowing. The report on the capital programme does ask for a couple of injections into the capital programme for exec board members to approve. One on repairs and the other on the moving of tenants and rehousing of tenants out of high-rise blocks. I'll leave it there, Chair, for questions that I'm sure will come.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm sure you can imagine my surprise when I looked at these papers and found 1 month in that children and families were overspent again for I don't know how many years in a row that is now, despite all the assurances and all the plans that were in place. Shall we accept now that it's going to get worse before it gets better, which is usually what we have to do at this stage? Yeah. It's frustrating. There's always the demand-led issues. My views about the external residential placements, but all of that was known when the budget was set. There's nothing new in the circumstances and the background. What we're saying is we haven't delivered on the plans that were put in place yet. And so I'd like an update on what we're doing to make sure we get that back on track. The other bulk of the overspend is around adults and health. If I've read and understood this correctly, I haven't been briefed directly, so forgive me if I've got this wrong. My understanding is the bulk of the overspend is around younger adults. Again, while that's a demand-led pressure, what I struggle to understand is how that's a surprise, and why we don't see that coming. So that's the next question. My final question is around the comments from the Chancellor about the pay awards and the indications that we're looking at a 5.5% pay award rather than the 3.5% that's budgeted for. What would the impact of that be? Do we have any indications yet about, given the Chancellor is so local to us now, as to whether that would be funded, or whether that would be an internal pressure? And when would you like me to sign the first letter jointly to the new Chancellor, which we could deliver by hand?
I mean, like you, Alan, I welcome the fact for the first time in a long time we have influential MPs in the city. I think that's a good. I think that's an excellent thing. What I'll do is I'll bring Victoria in and then Caroline on the specific question you asked about adults. Victoria, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. What I would say around children's and families overspend position is that it is really complex. And I'll just give you a flavour of some of the work streams that are underway within the service. And I think you'll be surprised about how much work is actually going on. But we're dealing with children, as we know this week, what's happened. We have to be really careful. There's safeguarding issues. And we're dealing with children who are the most vulnerable in our society. So obviously, we have got to get this right. But we are undertaking, we've done the sufficiency strategy to forecast where we think our numbers are going to be over the next few years. We've got work streams around small group living, foster care service, the reunification, semi-independent, over 18 special guardianships, and that's just on the looks after children. All those work streams are working really hard. They've got detailed action plans of what needs to be done by when. We're learning as we're going, because we've never been in this position where we've had the numbers that we've got and the support that those children require, which is complex. We're looking at the independent travel training with our children who have got education, health and care plans. We're reviewing that transport provision. We're looking at the policies around that. We've obviously in the middle of the Little Owls review. We've got IT work going on around the website, around the data analysis. I can't tell you how much work's going on, but there are delays in some of the development of some of those savings proposals. And a lot of those is because we're dealing with other government departments. So we've got Ofsted who are looking at our small group living homes. We're also working with partners. So the teams are working. We've got an oversight board with members. We've got a delivery board in the service. We've got a task and finish group, which I had this morning. And we've got individual work streams who are working on each of these. We're doing everything we can, but there are delays. So when we forecast the budget, and we've got to remember that this is for this financial year 24-25, we start that work in the August before. We've got some savings plans, and as we've learnt as we've gone on, it is taking us longer to deliver those than we'd expected. The numbers of children in external residential as we'd seen, had increased. We did expect those to come back down. They didn't do, and the complexity of those requirements have also increased, and the market's gone away from us because of the cost. So we budgeted for 101. We were at 121 when we actually did those budgets, and we thought the savings plans that were in place would have brought that figure down. It didn't, and this report is for the first 2 months of the year, and we have come down since then, but we're up to 150 in external residential. Now, we've currently brought that down, or the services brought that down to around about 146. So you can see the trajectory is going that way, but it takes time. As I've said, you know, we're dealing with children that have already been through a lot, and we're looking at making sure we've got adequate provision in the city, but we can't do that at significant risk. We've got to do that in a managed way so that we protect them as well as protecting the council's financial position. Okay.
Thank you, Victoria. And Caroline, please, and then I'll bring you in, Alan.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lamb, yes, you're right. This has come as somewhat of a shock to us within Adults and Health. I'm sure you'll appreciate that we do some really rigorous sort of analysis of our pressures every year based on previous numbers and trajectories. We based and identified our budget pressures for older adults and working age adults, growth in demand, but that was set in September. That does take into account peaks and troughs. We always anticipate that over the winter months, we're going to get a higher demand for new packages and new placements for both working age adults and older adults. And we did see that trend as usual. But then usually what happens after sort of February time is that the numbers reduce and we see a decline. We are now seeing a decline in the pressures for older adults for both home care and residential and nursing placements. We were really worried earlier in the year that pressure was continuing to increase, but it has come down now. But for working age adults, that pressure hasn't come down. Indeed, we have had a workshop just this morning looking at deep dives at the data of what the cause of this is, where the pressures are. We are also looking at the comparators from other local authority areas from the region and benchmarking against our statistical comparators and national data to understand whether the trend for working age adults pressures is unique to Leeds or whether actually this is the case more broadly and more widely. And at the moment, we are finding that this is not just unique to Leeds. I had discussion with my director colleagues in the Yorkshire and Humber region on Friday, and they are all expressing exactly the same sorts of pressures. So unfortunately, it has come as a surprise to us that we've not seen a reduction in demand for both supported living, particularly for people with learning disabilities, and admissions into residential and nursing care. And the nursing care pressures also included for people with mental health needs, quite complex needs, including people with dementia. So we are doing quite a lot of work around this, looking at opportunities to review packages, to negotiate with providers around fees. So a huge amount of work is in place, but unfortunately, we have seen this demand pressure go up.
Thank you. And Victoria, would you like to pick up the pay issue, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the pay award that's been announced is around those public services which are independently negotiated, so it doesn't include local government. Ours is negotiated nationally, but it doesn't fall within that group that the announcement was made around. In the pay award, we've actually budgeted for 3.5%. The JNC pay award has just been agreed at 2.5%. So it's the NJC that was still outstanding at the moment, which we know is being rejected by the unions, and we're waiting for them to come back on that. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, so just for completeness, it'd be helpful to know what the cost would be, or if it was 5.5%, and then finally, what's the impact of all this going to be, and what's the strategic plan? At the moment, we're looking at finding nearly an additional £20 million. I know from the papers, some has already been, the overspend is actually bigger than that, but some has already been clawed back and found. But I think it's important that we start understanding now what the potential challenging decisions that may have to come back to this board over the year to close this gap.
Victoria, please.
Thank you, Chair. So on the pay award account calculator, I know what 1% is up for everybody, but obviously the JNC now has been settled, so we need to redo the calculations for NJC. So I'll do that and get it to you. On the actions that we're taking, we've got significant plans in place which we're looking at. So in the paper, it does detail that we've gone back to the recruitment freeze, unfortunately, that we're stopping spending where it's not essential in the delivery of the service. We're looking at how much we're spending on agency and if we can reduce any of that. And we're also looking at overtime. So there are a number of things that we're doing. On top of that, as Councillor Cooper said, we're looking at the capital programme. So we're seeing what of those schemes are naturally delaying because we know there's issues with the procurement and finding the contractors to deliver those schemes. So they will naturally delay into the next year. And then we're looking at the other schemes and set which ones can we postpone and delay into 25, 26, so that we don't incur the interest costs on those. So we're doing that review of the capital programme now. We're also looking at savings proposals that we're actually implementing, and are there any more that we can go harder on? So we're looking at where we've said, for example, like income generation, can we generate more through putting more resource into to drive that forward? And we're looking at where we are charging for services for fees and charges. Is there a possibility of increasing any of those in year? But all those proposals will come back to a future executive board. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Mariana, please.
Yeah, just to emphasise everything that Victoria said, Councillor Lamb, I mean, we're taking it, as you'd expect, really seriously. As a team of directors with Tom, we're spending lots of time on both the in-year position and the future year positions ready for the budget setting process. We've been really, really clear in our communications. It's really difficult because, it's hard for staff. We know from our staff survey, staff are under pressure. But we also need to make sure that we live within the budget envelope that we've got. So just to say, it's absolutely dominating our discussions, and we'll do everything that we can to ensure that we live within the budget available. And I know all the directors are absolutely committed to that.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, it's just, well, the final question is to you, Councillor Lewis. We've seen the new Prime Minister jetting around, meeting leaders of devolved nations, very keen to meet all the mayors, including the Conservative mayor, which is a positive thing. I haven't noted any great meetings or fanfare about meetings with council leaders. So do you have any insight or indication that the financial position is going to change in the first budget under the new government?
I think the Chancellor's been very clear about the mess she inherited from 14 years of incompetent management of the economy. Stuff is still being unearthed at the moment after the government has come in, and there'll be a budget in the autumn. And I'm sure the government's position will be laid out in that budget then, including the mess that we've inherited and what we do about it. So we are, if I can finish before you jump in, exactly. We are making it very clear around the council's financial position, as I know all public services are.
Yeah, of course, just to correct you that it's a better economic inheritance than the previous government got in 2010. So let's not rewrite history. No, it absolutely isn't.
Well, I mean, things definitely got worse after 2010 in terms of our financial position, as we regularly talk about. So, looking at the papers in front of us, are there any more comments on these? We've covered item 12 and 13. Councillor Cooper, please.
I can just also mention to Executive Board, given some of the comments on these papers, that we are still working to the settlement given to us by the previous government until we get a budget from the current government that's just been elected 3 weeks ago. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn to the recommendations, two sets of recommendations on item 12. The recommendations are on page 325. Are people happy with those recommendations? That's great. Everybody is. And then for item 13, the recommendations are on page 338. Take it everybody's happy with those recommendations. That's great. We'll move on to item 14, please, Councillor Cooper. This is the one that has the supplementary information in front of us for. So, Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing the supplementary information to come forward. The reason for the information coming forward is because we wanted to take this report to scrutiny before it came to Executive Board, and the discussions then that took place at Scrutiny Board brought about some changes to part of the report that we wanted to reflect while we're actually here considering this report and the decision around it. And the timing between scrutiny and Executive Board wasn't long enough for us to do it in the normal way and send the papers out accordingly because of that. By way of introduction, this is the community asset transfer policy that we are looking to refresh. We've had this policy in place since 2012. And it served its purpose really over that time. We've had a number of successful community asset transfers over the years, and learnt a lot from the processes that we've undertaken during that time as well. So the paper before us sets out a new policy that we can use in a proactive way, in a positive way, as opposed to reactively when a building becomes surplus to requirements. Then you're looking at what can you do with it? Does the community need it? Is it a capital receipt? And all of those things. This policy is suggesting that we have set criteria around how buildings will be used going forward and what might be suitable for community asset transfer and what of course wouldn't be. I have to say we've done a lot of consultation on this. I led an elected member meeting on this where we had nearly half council members, elected members attending the consultation. So ward members extremely interested in what's happening in terms of buildings in their wards that they represent, quite rightly so. I have to say overwhelmingly very supportive of the new approach to looking at how we take these buildings forward, and setting out the criteria in how we do this. So I'm really pleased to be able to report that to Executive Board. And then I took the report to Scrutiny Board as well, who again were really overwhelmingly positive, made some really good suggestions about how we may work with ward members and elected members and scrutiny going forward with this policy, which we take on board. And we reflected on how we might use people's learned experience from previous community asset transfers. So organisations that have done this and how they've found the process, and maybe 5 years down the line, actually, give us some reflection about what would they like to see done differently and what their experience is around. Because we do know that a lot of communities and elected members want buildings for community use, but they don't necessarily have the right capacity to be able to deliver what's needed either for the community or for indeed the needs of the building, bearing in mind some of the maintenance issues that we have with those buildings as well. So, and the added information that you've received today is reflecting on the quality part of the report that we've made some changes and additions to. I'll leave it there because I'm sure there'll be some questions. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I welcome this approach, and I'll criticise when I think it's appropriate, but also I think not only is the policy right, it's been done in a good way on this occasion, and so I'll happily point that out. A few questions and comments about it. I think obviously the definition of an asset is that legally I think we have to call it a community asset transfer. In most cases, what we're actually doing is trying to remove a financial liability and make sure we've got robust policies in place for that. I can't imagine there'll be many circumstances where we'd want to transfer something which currently is a financial asset and generating a surplus for the council. I'm pleased within this that ultimately the decision maker will always be elected members around this. The key bit and the one bit of reassurance I'd like is about earlier in the assessment process, when we're deciding what ultimately might come to executive board, that we have a really sensitive approach. I think you've alluded to it in the papers, that there's a balance to strike between the financial value of an asset and actually its genuine community value. And it's not always easy to distinguish one from the other. And I think it's just really important that this is something that's done with elected members, with communities, with community groups. And at times we will have to make a decision where perhaps it's not the best financial value that's always the driver in these decisions. And the other point is making sure, I mean, we all understand this, but we ultimately are the last resort if it all goes horribly wrong, and we've transferred an asset and it doesn't work, it's back to us. And so we've just got to be sure, and I think the work that's been done is robust, that we have those good policies in place, and we are, as frustrating as it can be for community groups, the amount of paperwork and developing their business cases and things, it's really important for them. I've seen in business too many businesses fail with a good idea, but they didn't do the homework properly, they didn't do their business planning, they didn't know their numbers, they didn't have the figures, and a great idea and opportunity ends up falling flat for not doing that, and it's just minimizing the risk of that. But I absolutely support the paper and applaud the way that this has been done as well, through scrutiny and all the engagement.
Thank you. Mark, please.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Yeah, I think just reflecting on that question, Councillor Lamb, in relation to the financial liability and then balancing that community value versus financial value, it is really difficult to do. And it will ultimately come down to the proposals that come forward from the community to really justify that. However, what we want to do and what the policy is really driving towards is trying to give a little bit more certainty to community organisations around what the process is, what the buildings that are available and able to be and suitable for community asset transfer are, so that at least it gives those community organisations that certainty to bring forward those business cases and set out that case around why the community value that adds. I think in terms of coming to the list of community assets, you've picked up on the liability point. A lot of our buildings do have a degree of backlog maintenance. There's requirements around the energy performance standards of properties, as well as then the existing use of the property, and therefore that all has to be built into the consideration as to whether something is suitable for community asset transfer, as well as clearly the financial value, but also, as I say, the use of the property in its current form, and does that give the community benefit that you're alluding to. So it's a really balanced approach, and as has been outlined, it will come back to executive board for consideration in terms of adding anything to the list of potential community asset transfers.
Thank you. Martin, did you want to come in, please?
Well, just to add to what Mark said, I mean, I think from an officer perspective, council will provide the information within the legal framework within such decisions are made. So as a local authority, we have a statutory duty to achieve best consideration. That's section 123 of the Local Government Act. But as in paragraph 28 here, we also have the ability to do less than best disposals. So from an officer perspective, what we will do for members is make clear what the best consideration of the site is or the property, so that members can consider the value that they may wish to forego in progressing a community asset transfer based on the points that Mark raised in terms of the wider social value that you may attribute to the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments, Councillor Lamb, on the positivity of this report. And I think it's really important that actually we do set out, for all the reasons that you said, a set process and a way of going forward with these things with our community organisations and elected members. And I absolutely commit to working with elected members as we take this work further forward, you know, in their own wards, but also more generally strategically across the city as well, to continue to work with Scrutiny and any other interested elected members through workshops. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I take it as nobody else wants to come in on this item, so I will turn to the recommendations on 385, and I take it everybody's happy with those recommendations. That's great. We'll move on to your last paper, Councillor Cooper, which is item 15, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. The last report from me today, you'll be pleased to hear, is on the Being Our Best, our organisational plan update for 24-25. And the report really does provide how we as an organisation respond to and work through the Best City ambition, which we set forward in February this year. It provides that response, follows feedback that we've had from external focus, from the peer review that we had from city partners, as well, the anchor institutions and others. And as part of the local government settlement, the government introduced a requirement for all local authorities to produce productivity plans to be reviewed by an expert panel, including the Department of Levelling Up, which is no longer the Department of Levelling Up, I'm pleased to say. It's the Department of Housing and Communities, but we have still maintained the information in this report to do with that requirement, as that requirement hasn't changed yet, so you'll see it within there. The report goes into a lot of detail about how we intend to achieve being our best, and there are some great examples of how we do this, you know, through being a well-run city, providing high-quality public services, and being a well-run organisation. And I shall leave it there for questions if there are any, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Lamb, please.
Thank you, Chair. And as you say, Councillor Cooper, there's an awful lot of detail in here, and we could have a long session again on this one. But again, my view is a lot of that is for scrutiny. That's their function. The one area that I would like someone to respond to is around the aspect of working as one council, and I think we've got a long way to go on that. As Victoria will testify, I regularly moan to her about bins and grounds maintenance and various things. And I get one example of a car park in Wetherby, which has 4 different organisations, 3 council departments and Wetherby Town Council, that empty bins. And one isn't allowed to empty the bins of another because they don't have the right key. So someone will come along in one van and their bin's not full, so they don't empty it, but someone else's is, and they'll leave it, and that'll stay full until the next time someone comes, and you can repeat the same for grounds maintenance, for hedge trimming, for aspects of roads maintenance. I've had one today with antisocial behaviour where it involves housing, parks and countrysides, the environmental team and others. And I've just had a succession of emails. You need to talk to housing. You need to talk to environmental services. You need to talk to them. But all the way back around the loop, we're supposed to be one council. We're supposed to work together, and there's progress made, but there's an awful lot of work still to do. From the perspective of the public, it's just the council. They don't care that it's housing or it's this department or that department. I think there's a lot of efficiencies to be made and cost savings to be had still on those aspects, but just the principle of working as one council, there's work to do.
Mariana, please.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback, Councillor. I'm sure if James was here, given the services that you've mentioned, he would say something about, you know, that there is a lot more integration than there has been historically in those areas. But inevitably, we won't always get it right. So we're always welcome feedback for where we can do better. And, you know, always happy as senior office for you to give that feedback, and we can look at practice and see how it can be improved, see what efficiencies we can make. But I think, as you rightly say, there has also been a lot of progress made in relation to more integrated services, but inevitably such a big, complex organisation, there's probably always going to be more to do.
And certainly in terms of the review of community committees that's underway at the moment, part of that is around re-establishing and establishing ways of working at a local level. Because you're right, members of the public, when they come to us, they see it as one. They see it as one organisation. Are there any more comments on this paper, please? No. Okay, I'm going to turn to the recommendations on page 406, and I take it everybody is happy with those. I'm just going to skip an item here just to keep people on their toes. I'm just going to move on to item 17, Councillor Rafiq and Polly, please. So if you would like to introduce that item.
Thank you, Leader. This report sets the RSPB's proposed funding bid to National Lottery Heritage bid for the investment into St Aidan's Fairburn-Ings nature reserves as part of the Wild project. These two reserves are large public green spaces in Gartherton, Swillington and Kippax and Methley wards. If the bid is successful, it will improve accessibility of site, provide valuable space for the community and visitors to the site, and create potential for income generation at St Aidan's to help the site become financially sustainable. The board is asked to give its support in principle to the RSPB bid as the landowner and sole trustee, granting approval for a draw of funds from the trust to match funds if the bid is successful. I'll just stop there. It says it's a fairly positive news and way forward on this, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rafiq. Are there any comments? Councillor Lamb, please.
Yeah, just a quick comment, a question. I'm really pleased to see this. Very fond memories of Fairburn-Ings. My grandma used to take me there on a regular basis when I was little, so I know it well and very fond of it. The key question is really just an assurance that there is no risk to the council about this. Looking at it, it seems I don't think there is, but I'd just like that assurance, please.
Polly, please.
Just to confirm, any risks of overspend or not getting the match funding is underwritten by the RSPB, so there's no risk to the council.
And if the bid isn't successful, I'm sure we'll continue to work with the RSPB on the running of the site moving forwards. With that, shall I see if everybody's happy with the paper and turn to the recommendations? I take it everybody is, so we'll go to item 16, which is Councillor Pryor's paper, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Heart of Holbeck Levelling Up Round 3 funding. So this scheme is about creating a clearly defined centre for Holbeck with a connected, attractive route through, an accessible and inclusive park. For those who know the area well, they'll know this is an area quite close to the city centre, but really quite severed off from it by the road network, creating a barrier. So a brief summary of this report is to take forward 3 schemes. It's a refurbishment of St Matthew's Church, a redesigned local centre and enhanced Holbeck Moor Park, and energy efficiency improvements in 240 back-to-back homes. Obviously, there's a huge amount of detail here in the context of a much larger scheme, but I'll leave it there to see if there are any initial questions.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb, please.
Yep, thank you. I just really to welcome the report. I'm guessing are we allowed to call it levelling up funding still? Hopefully it's still coming, but it's a positive scheme and pleased to see it's going ahead.
Thank you. If there's no further comments on that paper, I'll turn to the recommendations on page 428. You can see that the board is happy with those. That's great. I see everybody's happy. We'll move on to the last portfolio, which is Councillor Venner, please, and item 18.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm bringing 2 papers today in my new portfolio. So the first one is the annual Equality, Inclusivity and Diversity report. So I'm very proud to bring this report. It shows the breadth of work that's being undertaken across the council to support this. It's, as I said, an annual report. It includes an update on our progress against the council's improvement priorities. It does note that poverty is a major factor and impacts on equality, including, of course, health inequality and other health outcomes, and bringing together the equality portfolio with health, which has happened with my portfolio, does mean that it gives a focus really to all the work we're doing, particularly around health inequalities and the marmot work. The report includes various appendices, including an update on LGBT inclusive Leeds. We're really aware that there are other areas we need to bring that same focus to, for example, disability. So one of our plans going forward is around the creation of disability inclusive Leeds in the same kind of structure as we have women-friendly Leeds, child-friendly Leeds, and LGBT inclusive Leeds. Appendix 7 is the statement from Executive Board to go back to scrutiny, as scrutiny have previously looked at this agenda. One aspect of work that I'm keeping from my previous portfolio that I'm very happy about is our work around care experience being a protected characteristic, and I'm going to be chairing an implementation group on taking that forward and the practical projects that will come out of that. As you requested, Councillor Lamb, at Exec Board when I brought that paper, that is going to be cross-party, so Councillor Stevenson's your rep on that board. The report also references the development of a cohesion strategy, the hate crime strategy being reviewed. It highlights our community-focused approach, learning from COVID, the role of the third sector, and the reference to the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian. And of course, we're the only local authority to have a Freedom to Speak Up Guardian. The recommendations in the report are to ask us to approve the documents which we're presenting to you today and to recognise the new priority around carers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions, please? Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, it's just a very quick comment, just for consistency and brevity. Again, I think this is the domain of scrutiny to get in to do a deep dive in. So just welcome the report and leave it there.
Thank you. Are there any more comments on the paper? I don't see anybody, so we'll turn to the recommendations on page 504. I take it everybody is happy with those. That's great. So we'll move on to the last paper, please, item 19.
Thank you. So this is the annual report of the Director of Public Health. It's mandated that the Director of Public Health does an annual report. And last year's report, of course, focused on children's experience and particularly coming out of COVID. And this year, we're at the other end of the age spectrum with a report on ageing well. And like the children's report, it has a very engaging accompanying film, which unfortunately we're not going to get to see today, but we did watch in Health and Wellbeing Board yesterday. So this report focuses on health inequalities. Of course, we all know the statistic very well about life expectancy being very different across the city in terms of the areas of deprivation compared to more affluent areas. But really significantly, this report is specific. It's called Ageing Well because it's about the fact that having poor health is not an inevitable part of aging, and actually there are also disparities in how well people age. So you're much more likely to start being in ill health in your early 50s compared to your early 70s if you're in an area of higher deprivation. The discussion was really positive at Health and Wellbeing Board yesterday. We had representatives there from Leeds Older People's Forum and Councillor Jenkins as the chair of the Ageing Well Board. Some of the issues that we looked at, I mean, one of the things that surprised me in the report is that housing isn't presented as a really significant issue. And I think if we were doing this report in 10 or 12 years, or 10 or 20 years, it would be, because actually a lot of older people are securely housed currently, but we also have a generation of people at middle age who are renting. And I think that's going to be a potential crisis going forward in terms of people in later middle age now who are not securely housed and obviously are aging. The report really highlights the importance of prevention. Again, it's called Ageing Well, fits really well with the new government's manifesto around a move from treatment to prevention, hospital to community. The recommendations are summarised in the cover report. It includes a reference to isolation. That really jumps out of the report as well. And in the consultation Victoria and her team did, both with older adults themselves and professionals for both groups, that came out in the top 3. I think was it the top issue for older people themselves, social connectedness. So having recommendations around how we address loneliness and isolation is really important. I'll leave my opening comments there, Chair, but I'm sure Victoria will be able to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. As it's your report, Victoria, do you want to add anything at this point before I come in for questions, please?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I mean, Councillor Venner's covered the key points really well in the conversation we had yesterday at Health and Wellbeing Board. I think the only thing I'd add, a couple of things, is that we know we are a relatively young city demographically, and often the ageing population is seen to be a priority for more rural and coastal areas. So we were particularly interested to make sure we really understood our 50 plus population. It's still broadly a third of our citizens and 1 in 3 of the population. So we wanted to be really confident about where we are now, the projections in the increase in that population over the next 10 years. And we even though we're not looking to see the same increases as rural and coastal areas, we're still looking at around another 20,000 older people in the community. And also that population is becoming more deprived in its overall and incredibly more diverse. So it doesn't stand still. We're in an incredibly strong position, as Councillor Venner said, in terms of our work around ageing well and being an age-friendly city. But there is a real call to action around prevention, as Councillor Venner has highlighted. And part of that is around what's good for people, families and communities. But in this time of financial challenge, we also make the point really strongly that our public services, including our health and social care services, are unsustainable unless we take a different approach to ageing well, because the current burden of poor health is just unaffordable as well as unacceptable. So it is a report to the city. There are reports for ourselves across the council, but also, there are recommendations for ourselves across the council, but also clear recommendations to our NHS partners around further investment in prevention, and also recommendations to other partners, including at West Yorkshire level around transport and with our academic colleagues. So thank you for allowing us to bring the report today, and I look forward to feeding back on the progress on the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a few questions, so I'll rattle through them and then they can get answered in one go, if that's okay. So there's an awful lot of work being done here. Much is to be applauded. A lot of boards and programmes, a lot of money being poured into lots of areas. But when you actually look at the health outcomes, we're not seeing much upward trajectory on any of the indicators. And so that comes to the root of the questions. What are we doing about those things? So public transport is one example. what are we doing with the mayor and Wyker about transport and making sure it's in the right places. I think again in outer areas where the population is disproportionately older and the services don't meet needs, don't go where people need to go to access their healthcare. I understand in inner city areas only 60% of eligible people apply for a bus pass when they reach pension age. Is there something that we can do about that to make a big difference for people? Refuse collection, again, if the statistics are correct, a lot more people are going to need pull-out services and bag-out collections, etc. Is that data and information being fed in? Refuse services is one example, but are we feeding that data into the right services to make sure, as people are writing their plans, equally when we're doing the local plan 2040 updates at the minute, is all these statistics and data being fed in, so we're considering the housing needs for that period and beyond, and the sort of specialist provision that we need. I'm hopeful we'll continue funding neighbourhood networks. And then what are we doing, again, looking at the statistics on take up of screening services for bowel cancer, cervical cancer, breast cancer, etc., getting people to actually take those things up, which again can make a huge impact. And then finally, one point that we remiss of me not to make, a policy that's not aging well is the implementation of charges on car parks, which again disproportionately affects older people and does not help them to have healthier outcomes. My view remains it's a false economy, and we should think again about that one.
Thank you. Who'd like to start on that list that Councillor Lamb presented to us? Tim, please.
Thank you, Chair. Tim Fielding, I'm Deputy Director of Public Health, and I lead broadly around the Ageing Well programme of work and have been closely involved in some of this along with my team. Thanks, Councillor, for the questions, all of which I think are really relevant, obviously, to this area. Just to try and answer and respond to a few of those, certainly the ones around. One of the things I'll say is, alongside this report, we do have the age-friendly structure in Leeds, which is really well established. It complements a child-friendly approach, and so we have an age-friendly board. It's been around for quite a long time now. It's chaired by Councillor Jenkins, and we have really good representation not only from across the council but also from across partners across the city in that, and really strong third sector involvement as well. And there are, we have a clear strategy and an action plan around that, themed around 6 priorities with accountable leads for those areas. And clear actions being taken. So there are a number of the things that you referred to do get brought up and addressed and shine a light on through that. So one of those is transport and road safety. So there are very live ongoing conversations constantly about the travel and transport issues for older people through that. Much of the conversation, as you'd expect, is focused around buses, both in terms of access, but also around the bus pass issue. And there has been work and questions raised in there about the accessibility and about the uptake rate. That's led to clarification about the availability of those bus passes being through hubs and libraries, for example, but it's also highlighted the low level of awareness of that offer and the fact that people think you have to only be able to apply digitally. So there is agreement and work ongoing through that group to try and increase the awareness of that and have a wider push. But there's also work done around things like constantly challenging and liaising with the highways department about the sort of modifications that are made around whether it be road crossings or curbs to be as appropriate as possible with feedback from older people themselves, and where necessary challenging and advocating nationally about some of the measures that are out of the hands locally. We also, just to say on that one, we have got an upcoming conversation with Wyker, although they are formally part of that group. They don't tend to attend very regularly, but we are having a specific meeting with them, particularly around the transport issues and the bus issues particularly. So that is in the pipeline. Screening issues certainly isn't it within the remit of the age friendly, but we do work. Another part of my role is around long-term conditions and cancer work, and we do a huge amount of work right across the life course around uptake of cancer, uptake of screening across the board. So I can certainly offer some assurance that there is wide-ranging activity happening in that area. And another one that you mentioned was around the neighbourhood networks. And again, I can absolutely confirm we work really closely as part of Adults and Health with colleagues in Adults and Health around the neighbourhood networks. There is public health funding goes into supporting the neighbourhood networks, but we work extremely closely in the delivery of that, and they're very, very actively part of that whole broader age-friendly approach. So it's very well integrated. Apologies if I've missed anything, but I'll hand over to let Victoria pick up.
Victoria, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to respond to Councillor Lamb's first question around what are we doing around the life expectancy and our health indicators across the city more broadly. I mean, in summary, we've seen life expectancy stall since 2010. So we've had this very flat position with life expectancy for both men and women. The question was, what are we doing about it? So even though this report is called Healthy Ageing, we know that healthy ageing begins at birth. So in terms of what are we doing about it in broad terms, that the public health work that we have responsibility as a council to deliver, which starts with pre-birth and at birth, that kind of best start children and families agenda, right through to working age adults, public health programmes and services before we even get to ageing well and the work that Tim's just described. So what are we doing as a council is continued investment in our prevention and public health programmes in order to prevent poor health and keep people well, as well as working with our NHS colleagues to support the work that they need to do, potentially around or primarily around what we call secondary prevention. So when people are presenting to clinical services with greater needs and risk factors, we're making sure that our NHS colleagues actually continue to do the prevention work that they've done previously. What we've seen during the COVID period is often a knock to some of that prevention work because of the COVID impact and because of the pressures of the NHS system. So a very clear recommendation of this report is to really step up the prevention activity with our NHS provider organisations that has taken a hit through this COVID period. So in broad terms, that's what we're doing. But and we also have more targeted work in the parts of the city with the poorest health outcomes. So we have this general approach of targeting our energies to where the need is most. The challenge clearly at the moment is to keep the focus we currently have as a council and a city on prevention as much as we can do within this current financial climate, because it's often the thing that gets kind of deprioritize when financial times are tough. But that's the broad kind of strategy for how we want to really see that increase in our life expectancy and healthy life expectancy outcomes going forwards. But happy to provide more detail on that, Councillor Lamb.
Thank you. Councillor Pryor, please.
I just want to briefly touch on and expand on some of the work we're doing with WICA and Mayor Brabin. So obviously back in 2022, Mayor Brabin launched Mayor's Fares to reduce fees to £2. Obviously, once people reach a certain age, they'll be able to get their bus pass. But in the years before then, it means they'll have access to cheaper buses. And I think that's particularly the greatest savings were from those furthest away from the city centre. And so that's a great benefit to those. Obviously, the Mayor's working on bus franchising at the moment, something I know you were opposed to personally, but it gives a real opportunity to ensure that profits from bus companies, from bus routes, can be put back into the service, so we can put more money into those routes further away, those routes which may be less used and need subsidising. I'm sure that's something you'd be interested in, representing an outer area. But then particularly on, which I think is really good news, on Monday, Mayor Brabin launched the new 9 and 9C service, which is a new circular service. I think those who get buses know that too much is going in and out from the centre of Leeds. So it's really fantastic. We'll have these new buses which do a circular, both clockwise and anti-clockwise route of Leeds. And I hope that can really work to increase patronage and actually give people around the city an opportunity to get to places far more easily than they otherwise would have done.
Councillor Venner, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to a couple of points. Interestingly, the questions you asked really overlap with the questions that were asked at Health and Wellbeing Board yesterday. We had many of the discussions on the points that you've raised. So we talked about, for example, a low uptake of screening, particularly in areas of highest deprivation, and the work that takes place to get screening out into communities. We do know there's areas where we need to do more work. So Councillor Arif highlighted the low bus pass uptake, which is particularly low in her ward, which we know is the ward of highest deprivation, and the need to do more work in community languages and in communities to promote things like free bus passes. I wanted to follow on from what Victoria said about health outcomes and life expectancy having stalled since 2010. Chris Whitty states that the biggest risk to health outcomes is poverty in any country, in any time. That is the biggest risk across the world. That's the biggest risk to health outcomes. And our life expectancy stalled since 2010. That isn't a coincidence. That is a link to, 14 years of austerity and the decimation of public services. We are in a health policy context now where in the Labour manifesto, there's a really explicit reference to tackling the wider determinants of health, which fits really well with the way we work as a city anyway. But I gave a couple of practical examples yesterday of how we're doing that, because as Victoria stated, although this report's about ageing well, you don't suddenly develop health conditions, when you're older, out of nowhere. People becoming unwell in their 50s, as opposed to their 70s, is because of, having had a lifetime of growing up in, less affluent circumstances. So a practical example I gave of work we're doing around tackling the wider determinants of health, which we're doing with the Marmot team, is that I chair a group called the Health and Housing Working Group. And the reason I chair it and not Councillor Lennox is because it's really explicitly about housing as a health issue. And practical projects we've got out of that include, there's a project around children's respiratory health. Sometimes that's about moving families out of unsuitable housing. Sometimes it's about adaptation. Sometimes it's about things as simple as vacuum cleaners and bedding. We've also got a really successful hospital discharge programme, which works a lot with older people, where we've located housing workers in the discharge of care hub at LTHT. So you've not got older people stuck in hospital or people of any age because there's a housing issue. So yeah, there's some really practical work we're doing around this kind of public health agenda. But yeah, I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any more comments on this paper? Councillor Lamb, please.
It was just picking up on one of the points Councillor Pryor made about bus use, and it is being slightly parochial. Things like WICA don't pay enough attention to outer areas and cross-border issues. There's a lot more work to do, and increasingly, because of the way healthcare services are commissioned differently. For example, a lot of my residents have to attend healthcare appointments in York. There's one bus every 2 hours that stops at 5 o'clock, doesn't run at the weekend, and you need to be able to access your appointments. You have to frequently get a bus into Leeds to either get a bus or a train to go to York, and the same in reverse. And if you've got health conditions and things, that is a real challenge, and that's not unique to my community by any means, and that's the sort of conversation we need to be having. We are doing things locally about it, but that's where we need to feed in. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, my was in a very similar position, and Leeds Council and West Yorkshire has provided much better bus services, not as good as it could be. Hopefully get their franchising than North Yorkshire has over time. Our residents are interested in hearing about different councils. You're right, they want the best services available, and like I say, we had it in a meeting our ward once where people were grumbling about their local bus service, and then somebody says, well, I've just moved here from North Yorkshire, it's brilliant, we had 2 buses a day where we were, and they were on every half hour now. So it is, like I say, people do want the best, but clearly clearly that's an area that we need to work on. The cross-border issue is a big issue for people that need to get around for appointments. Like Councillor Price said, and one another, not everybody's appointment is somewhere located exactly where the buses go. Okay, is there anything else on this item? I don't see anybody else. So I'll turn to the recommendations on page 667. And I take it everybody is happy with those. That's great, thank you. And I will close the public part of the meeting here.